and have approval of the minutes. Maybe we should start off by election of officers, which is next on the things, and then we could run the meeting.
Well, you have approval of minutes, and then you also have public comment before you do the election
I know
of
that,
officers.
but who's going to run the meeting up until then?
Well,
I submit that Herb runs it.
All right, we have approval of minutes, a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion approved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Public comment? Do we have any public comment at this point? Okay, seeing none, we can go on to election of officers. We need a chairman and a vice chairman. And
I'd like to, can I nominate Herb Woodall for chair?
Second.
any other nomination?
I nominate Jack Shute for chairman.
Okay. We got a second for Jack Shute?
I'll second.
Okay, George. Okay. Now, so, Sherry, you want to call? Oh, here comes our chairman. We started the meeting without you.
Okay.
what you would do is you would go for the first nominee first. So
All
it
right.
would be for Mr. Whitall, Mr. Baczynski,
Aye.
Mr. Blumstein,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Whitall,
Aye.
Mr. Shoup,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter.
Aye.
Passes 7-0.
Okay, I would like to nominate Jack Shoup as vice chairman.
6-0, sorry.
Second.
Any other nomination? Then you want to call the roll? I guess if we only got one nomination, it doesn't matter too much.
Right. Did you want me to call the roll? Because if he's the only one that's nominated, he's the vice chair.
Okay. All right. Since the election of officers is over, we got new business, which is Chef Wright. You can give us an update on utility litigation, et cetera.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm glad to be back. Thank you. Actually, there's several things I need to go over with you today, one of which is not on your agenda, and that's an update on the OUC discussions. And the reason that didn't make it onto the agenda is that we got the updated information at the end of the day on Tuesday. And so it was Saturday, 2 days ago, before I could write the memo with the Thanksgiving holiday. But we'll get to that. The first item, as on your agenda, is an update on the litigation. As you may know, last Tuesday, the Florida Public Service Commission was scheduled to vote on the Indian River County petition for declaratory statement. As best I can put it together from some conversations with folks inside the PSC and outside the PSC, at the very last minute on Tuesday morning, Indian River County made a strategic decision to seek deferral, was the official phrasing of their petition. The best intel I have is this, that they wanted to present 4 different questions than the 14 articulated in their petition to the Public Service Commission, to which the Public Service Commission said, no, you can't do that. The staff, that is, said, no, you can't do that. That is amending your petition, and we will have to start everything over. And they said, well, I guess then we'll defer it. Thank you very much. And it frankly took all of us by surprise. We didn't know it was coming, and I didn't know it was coming until they got to item 23 on the agenda, and the chairman announced that that item 23 was deferred. And I said, okay, but that's the deal. Indian River County did later in the day file a formal request that the matter be deferred in the form of a letter. They represent in that letter that they will be filing a new petition for declaratory statement, pared down to a couple of questions, were the words that their attorney used, today. Haven't seen it yet, and we'll keep you posted when it shows up.
Okay, so they're going from 14 plus 4 down to 2 or 3.
14 to 4 to a couple, which
Okay.
may be 4, it may be 1 or 2. I'm not completely sure. We'll find out when we see it. And as I said, they represented in their letter that they expect to file, and verbally they represented that they expect to file that today. And we'll just see what it says and go forward accordingly. It does start a whole new clock, a time clock that exists under the declaratory statement provisions of the Florida Administrative Procedure Act. And the way that schedule will go is they'll file, assume they file today, we get 20 days. Actually, it'll be published on Wednesday in the Florida Administrative Register. And from the date of publication in that electronic publication, we get 20 days to file a response. I assume that we will. My guess is that it will be very much like the substance of what we filed in our previous motion to dismiss and alternative memorandum supporting denial of the requested statements. But nonetheless, we'll be on the clock to do that within 20 days. The staff will then have to write a recommendation. And at present, that if they file today or tomorrow or the next day, it would go on the Public Service Commission's February 3rd agenda conference. And the reason that it's so quick, 60 days, is that they only have 90 days in which to issue an order, and the February 3rd agenda is really the only meeting or the latest meeting in that 90-day window that they have to vote on it.
Okay. Thank you. Any question?
On the other litigation front, I think you know that we went to the joint public meeting last month. October. Today's December 1st. On the town of Indian River Shores complaint, and that was a relatively short meeting in which the parties said what they had to say, and that was that. The next and probably final step in the conflict resolution process that's set forth in the special Florida Governmental Dispute Resolution Act is a mediation which is now scheduled to be held on Wednesday, December the 17th. Have every reason to believe it will go forward accordingly. The mediator is a very good mediator. I think all three of us, Dylan Reingold, County Attorney, Bruce May, the town's attorney, and I have worked with the mediator, Carlos Alvarez, in different circumstances, and we all think highly of him. I would have to say, based on the positions articulated by our opponents, I will be surprised if the outcome of the mediation is anything other than impasse, but I'm just being candid with you. And from there, we'll see what happens next. The town would have to do something, either reactivate its existing lawsuit or possibly file an amended complaint or something like that. But we'll see what happens, and when that happens, we will move forward accordingly.
Who will go to that meeting?
At
The mediation.
Yeah, yes, sir. That's a good question.
From us. Who goes from
at
us?
least the city manager, the city attorney, and myself. It may be that one of our elected officials will also go. I don't know if that decision has been made finally. I do believe that both the town and the county intend to have an elected official as part of their team at the mediation.
So it's a mediation between the town,
The county.
us, and the county.
And the city, yes, sir.
Excuse me, and that's held at Indian River Shores.
Pardon?
Where is the meeting?
I don't know that the venue has been set yet. It has been talked about, but I don't think anybody has said where it's going to be.
Jim?
Do you know?
I don't think it has been set yet, but we've talked about either in this building or the county building, because those are the only places that have the space available. The second thing is this is going to be one of those open meetings where possibly public comment will be taken and that kind of stuff is dictated as the county would like.
Yeah, and just brief additional information that this will be an unusual mediation in that it will be entirely public. When the parties may go to breakout rooms if they wish, but even those will be public, and that's by sort of agreement amongst all the parties, based on discussion of mediation and public records and sunshine and all that stuff. I think the consensus, or at least the majority view, was that probably better just to have it all be public than anything else. So it'll be unusual. Usually in a mediation, one side goes to one room, the other side goes to the other room, and the mediator does shuttle diplomacy and tries to work it out. But in this context, we'll just see what happens.
And of course, this will be published as to where it is when it's, so it'll get public notice so people will know where it is.
That is correct. It'll be noticed as a public meeting.
Chef, do you imagine that you'll still have the breakout rooms, so perhaps at least the parties that are doing the mediation will not be in the same room with the other parties? I mean, how do you think this? I've never seen a mediation that was run like this.
Neither have I. I gather there will be breakout rooms, but I think the doors will have to be open, and we'll just see. And there may not even be. We may not even bother going to breakout. Like you, Scott. I've never seen one like this, and I don't really know what to make of it. I will be there and participate in good faith, and that's all I could say.
Okay.
All right, what else we have?
Okay, on your agenda, I do have one other thing that, as I said, didn't make it onto your agenda. But on your agenda, we have two proposed resolutions. One that is that the city would hold a referendum as closely as possible consistent with the provisions in the Section 36604 sub 7 Florida statutes as it was enacted in 2008. It calls for a referendum of each named retail electric customer of the city. It's quite complicated because the supervisor can't conduct elections like this. She can only conduct elections that involve registered voters and whole precincts, whole districts, whether it be a city council district, a county commission district, well, you don't have districts, it's all at large, but state representative district, senate district, and so on. That's all she can do, and she can only work with registered voters. So we are in the posture of having to do that ourselves, and Tammy Vaughn, the clerk, in her role as the city's supervisor of elections, would have to run it. We did engage with the city manager's approval, Mr. Ron Lebaski, a former law partner of mine, but the reason we engaged him is that he's been the general counsel for the Florida State Association of Supervisors of Elections for the last 26 years, and he's probably the foremost authority on election law, so he's advising us on how to proceed with that. So the idea is to have that. The latest date that we would propose to have it would be November 3rd, 2015, which is the date of the next city general election, the next election for city council members. We propose that we, and this would be a matter for y'all and for council tomorrow, but we propose that we be authorized to talk with the county and the town to see if they want to have it earlier. You know, they've said, we want a referendum, we want a referendum, we want a referendum. So, okay, let's have a referendum. If you want to have it early, we can do it as a special election before next November. Let's talk about it. And so that's where we are, and that's the direction in which we're headed, and the resolution sets that forth.
Well, how do you determine who votes? That's obviously from our electric rate names.
Yes, sir.
Now, if it's a business, who votes?
Each named retail electric customer will get one vote, and there will have to be some protocol for the business entity to designate who votes.
And where do you hold the election? Do you just hold it the one day? Or do you have, our regular elections you get 1 week ahead of time? Obviously, you can't do that. Is one day.
Our hope and plan, or plan and hope at this point, is to contract with the supervisor to help us with some of these functions, including printing the ballots, programming the machines, and hopefully also to have them help with administering other polling places. Whether we have early voting is something that needs to be worked out. We don't know if we're going to be able to do that or not. As far as I'm concerned, I don't have any problem with early voting or absentee voting or anything else. We're just going to have to work out the protocols for that, and we're going to have to work out the details of how somebody who wants to vote for Walmart or Piper, who has some number of accounts at their facility, they're going to have to send something that says, I'm here to vote for Piper Aircraft. Here's my letter of authorization. Here's Piper on the voter roll. Check me off, and I'll vote. And they go vote.
And if you have it between May and October, a lot of people aren't even going to be here to vote. So then I guess you'd have to do some kind of absentee voting.
Right.
Also, those people that aren't going to be here, a lot of them aren't registered voters anyway. We have, will you have to also be a registered voter?
No, the fact that they are or are not a registered voter does not matter. The statute said each named retail electric customer shall have one vote, and that's how we're going to run it.
I own a house, which is equally owned by my wife.
Yes, sir.
Can she vote, or?
Who's on the bill?
I'm sorry?
Whose name is on the bill?
My name is on the bill, but both of us are obligated.
You are the named retail. In my view, if your name is on the bill, you are the named retail electric customer. You get the vote.
How about representation of the owners in this vote? The owners of the utility. We're going to represent the customers, or try to. I think this is kind of a ridiculous way of doing it, but we're going to pick customers, but we're not going to pick any of the owners. So they get no say at all. That's as bad as what we had before, which is the customers didn't have representation.
May I call you Bob? May I call you Bob?
Sure.
Bob.
Call me anything you want.
The statute says each named retail electric customer having one vote. That's how we're going to do it.
Regardless of whether that's considered fair or whatever.
I didn't write the statute. The statute says each named retail electric customer having one vote. So if you've got a condominium with 44 residential owners, each residential occupants, some tenants, some owners, and there are 44 names on the bills that are sent for the service to each of those condominium units or apartment units, whatever it is. It's the person's name on the bill who gets to vote, regardless of who owns the property.
And no
I didn't write it.
No representation of the owners of the utility, or
well, the owners of the utility the owner of the utility is the city of Vero Beach, and through the city, your citizens, and to the extent they're electric customers, they get to vote. To the extent they're not electric customers or they have some other relationship, they don't get to vote. That's how the statute reads.
I think I don't know how you feel about it or the city feels about it, but I think that whoever loses will have a wide open field for lawsuits and challenges and everything else.
Well, what we are endeavoring to do, and the reason that we hired Mr. Lebasky, is the statute says this is how it's to be, and follow the provisions of the election code to the extent applicable. Now, they're not real applicable, as we have discussed, because they don't involve registered voters. They don't involve the election does not involve whole precincts. But we are going to endeavor to follow the statute as closely as we can, as closely as possible. and we're going to do everything we can to avoid complaints about unfair access or unequal access. We're going to try to have several polling places and so on, so that folks can't say we were denied access to this election. But within those larger parameters, we're going to follow the statute to the extent we can. If we said it's open to registered voters, then you got a whole other set of problems, and not the least of which is you wouldn't be doing what the statute said. And then you'd open yourself up to, well, you didn't do what the statute said.
Is there any precedent for doing it this way?
Well, the answer is, I think the answer is sort of. We do in Florida still have elections in which the voters are not necessarily registered voters. The voters are freeholders, owners of land. There are still elections where only freeholders are allowed to vote. So to some extent, that is analogous to this, freeholders analogous to retail electric customers. It's not what we're used to, but it is what it is.
I have a comment for you, or a question too. Sure. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. Wouldn't the simplest solution be to simply put a ballot in with every bill that goes out, a mail-in ballot, and then that goes to whoever the named customer is, and that named customer returns it or doesn't return it, votes it or whatever, but you don't have all the complications of...
Well, there are other complications with having a mail-in ballot. You don't have control over the ballots, and the statute says it shall be conducted in conjunction with the next general election. Now, the next general election at the time the statute was enacted was in November of 2008, and the city, for reasons that are clearly articulated and explained in the history of the discussions at city council meetings in 2008, determined that the statute did not apply to it. And I think technically, they were right. Mm-hmm. The way the statute reads, the city was not within the scope of the criteria. They decided not to. Nonetheless, it says in connection with the general election, and that following the statute as closely as we can, that is how we think we ought to do it.
Mm-hmm.
How is that different, and are those problems different than just absentee ballots in general? Losing control of not having control of the votes.
I don't know. I'm not the election lawyer. I mean, I think I'm not sure of exactly what the details of administering absentee balloting are.
One of the things that stick out real quick is on absentee ballots you have a name of a registered voter, so you can follow the legitimacy of the ballot. The other thing, and George, coming back to your question, for example, Piper Aircraft doesn't have a name. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of businesses will not have names. So you send out a ballot to those folks and somebody sends the ballot back in, they may or may not be authorized by that entity to vote.
Yeah. But the absentee ballots are validated by the signature of the voter on the ballot when it comes into the supervisor of elections office, so that they can verify that this is in fact the person who is supposed to be voting. Again, I think Chef mentioned that in the case of businesses, they might have to nominate a named person to vote their shares or whatever you want to call it, to vote their vote. But that's going to be a very small proportion of the vote. For people who are just regular consumers, have a bill comes to their mailbox in their name. I don't know that there's loss of control involved there.
Well, on a registered voter, if you see that, you compare their signatures to their voter registration card. We have nothing to compare a signature coming from Jim O'Connor's house, as an example. Mm-hmm. It could be anybody, because there's no comparison. So, again, going back to the way that election systems are run, you have a voter registration card with someone's signature on it, you have a absentee ballot that comes in, and I happen to have been in some of those roles where you're trying to check to make sure the Ys look the same and that kind of stuff. Where in our particular case, we have nothing to validate that, my Jim O'Connor's bill might have gone to Kentucky somewhere and somebody else just voted for it, or I threw my ballot into the garbage can and somebody picked it up. Trying to, and those are the type of issues that I think what Chef is saying is that we're hiring an attorney that will have to tell us how do you make this a valid election, because I believe somebody made the comment we're liable to be in litigation after this is just for holding the referendum, and that possibly could. So we got to make sure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted as much as possible. And invalid voting, people invalidly voting in the thing obviously neglects or negates the entire process. So we just got to be careful as to who gets
I understand and I agree. I'm just saying that trying to match up named customers with regular voting rolls or whatever is going to be a much tougher job than keeping control of absentee ballots. But that's, again, it's just a suggestion. I'm not...
At least tentatively, I think that I think the game plan would be that wherever the polling place was would have a role, the equivalent of the voter roll. It would be it would be the list of named retail electric customers as of the specified date, which probably is going to be 29 days in advance of the election, assuming that the electric department and finance department can furnish the listing as of that date. If not, it'll be as close as practicable to that. And folks will have to show ID or authorization in the case of your commercial customers. And there are actually a few thousand commercial customers, so it's not a trivial issue. They'll have to show ID and they'll get checked off. And at the end, if we've got 6 polling places, we'll have to make sure that there was only 1 vote cast per customer to the extent they voted. I used to work in another state in the southeast, and I won't name it, but it says it's election day. Vote early, vote often.
I thought that was a northern tradition.
Well, I'm only familiar with it from this other state where I used to live.
I've got a question, probably best asked of Jim.
Sure.
What information is going to be provided to the public or to the customers of the utility that will clarify why they would or would not vote for a utility authority? Right now, as far as I know, all you have is the name of the authority, and you're going to have a referendum, and should we operate the utility under a different structure, but if you were to send it to me today with the question, yes or no, I couldn't answer you because I have no idea as to whether it would be, in my mind, better or worse.
Okay, I think Chef's going to have to answer that, but you got to remember we got to walk a very thin line. There is a state law that we, holding an election, can't promote or discount the results, but I think Chef would have to.
Yeah, and Jim, I understand that we are on a very thin line, but yet I'll recall us back to the referendum that I think we voted on for the power plant here a few years ago. All of the upheaval that came after that because literally people didn't understand what they were voting for.
The statute says explicitly what the question on the ballot shall be. There's more to my answer than that, which I will give you in a few seconds. But it says, should a separate electric utility authority be created to operate the business of the electric utility in the affected municipal electric utility? That's what the statute says, so we'll substitute. Should a separate electric utility authority I think we'll do this, and we're going to consult with the county and the town to make sure they don't object to this wording. But should a separate electric utility authority be created to operate the business of the Vero Beach Electric Utility? That is what I think the question on the ballot will be. Having said that, The second resolution on your agenda and in the materials you should have is the proposition that we also develop an ordinance which may morph into a charter amendment or some other documentary establishing document, but there would actually be something that says this is what we think the utility authority would be, and they can consider that, or they can consider something else. They're technically separate issues, but I'm sure there'll be a lot of information regarding what a utility authority might look like by the time we get to election day, whenever that turns out to be.
I understand you're saying, but it makes sense to me that ordinance, or at least an outline of the ordinance, be made available so that people have some understanding of why they would want to vote one way or the other.
And as a proposed ordinance or proposed charter amendment or proposed interlocal agreement or whatever the establishing document would turn out to be, that'll be available as a matter of public record from council action at such point as we get it worked out, get it written in detail and approved by council for consideration. And folks who don't like it can say, we don't like it and here's what we don't like about it, and you ought to vote for a utility authority, but you ought to work against this particular version of the utility authority structure and have it say something else, and that's how democracy works.
Then the ordinance will be, our proposed ordinance would be available prior to any date set for the vote?
In every scenario that I can imagine, yes, sir.
Okay.
I have a question. Who specifically is going to be ironing out these kinks of this election? I mean, I know that you said that you might want to get the supervisor of elections to help us, but is that who we're going to rely on to figure all this out? Or
the way I see it unfolding is it'll be a collaborative effort between the city through the clerk, our election specialist attorney, Ron Lebaski, and the supervisor, Leslie Rossway Swan, with me kind of hovering in the wings on electric utility speciality stuff. Okay. And and the city manager and the city attorney and others, and we'll be talking to the town and the county, because it's certainly our goal to have this come off in the least controversial way possible, so that we minimize the possibility of ex post challenges to the election.
Another question I have is duplicate bills. I know it says every named utility, but I guess this is a two-part question. How would somebody prove that they are a utility customer? Would they just bring a bill? And if that's the case, places like Piper may have more than one bill, or Walmart or somebody else. What happens if you have two people show up with two separate bills? And then I'll leave you alone after that question.
Did you want me to only address the case where there's a commercial customer who gets multiple bills in one name?
That's one question.
Okay.
Right.
That customer gets one vote.
Okay.
So the way I think it will have to work is that after the election there'll have to be some kind of canvas audit sort of thing that compares who voted at which poll locations, to make sure that each named retail electric customer voted only once. And if they voted more than once, then one of the votes, assuming that two people show up with apparently valid authorizations, and I don't think this is going to be a real problem, but if you assume that two people showed up with apparently valid authorizations at two different polling places, somebody's going to have to say, wait a minute, ABC company voted twice, we're pulling one of their votes out.
Okay.
Jack?
I have a question.
Question.
Then you can.
Question. It seems like essentially the city will have to validate the votes as they come in. Someone in the city.
Yeah, and because the city's going to have to run the election.
And it would also seem, first of all, if you're not a customer, then you're not going to be invited to vote. So I think that takes care of that. If you have an electric bill, then you're going to be invited.
Yes, sir.
And I would think the other thing that concerns me is that the results of the election, I would think, are not going to be announced the evening of the final day. I think that's something else that almost has to go into the equation and be announced to people, that we need 3 days to validate. I mean, there's no way on election day somebody can match this to that. It's a guess on my part.
Well, that's a reasonable concern, Jack, and all I can say is that that's something that we'll have to work out. It could be that they will be machine balanced, they will be machine read. Those results, I would think, would be available the evening of the election, but pending the audit to make sure that there weren't duplicate ballots and pending whatever else the canvassing board does. And again, I'm the PSC guy, not the election guy, so I'm not even 100% sure of that. Okay.
So Piper or the school board who have multiple meters would get one vote?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now I have 2 meters, one in my commercial. I have one commercial meter and one residential meter. Would I be limited to one vote, or would I get 2 votes?
Well, I would say, let's say you get a bill at your house, Scott Stradley, 123 Main Street. You get that bill, you get to vote for that. If you have if your other account is Scott Stradley CPA at 456 Division Street, that's a different named electric customer. You would get to vote for that account as well.
Okay.
Okay, George?
Assuming that an authority or whatever is approved and so on, there are going to have to be more votes in the future, presumably. If that's how are members of the authority going to be selected? I mean, the idea is that this should be a representational body, so that people can stand for different sections of the community, and so there will be more votes to come in the future. So what we establish now has got to be sturdy enough to go into the future without a lot of revisions, unnecessary revisions. Okay.
Right, which is why we're going to be working with the town and the county and any other interested customers that feel they're not adequately represented by those folks throughout the development of the utility authority document, whatever that turns out to be.
Yeah.
At a minimum, and by the way, there are different models. There are 6 other utility commission, utility authority type entities already existing in Florida, and there are different models for how they're chosen. Some are elected, some are appointed by the city council of the utility, and other ways. That'll be part of the setup. Certainly, the contemplation is that there would be geographic representation, so that customers outside the city limits would be represented in reasonable proportion to customers inside the city limits. So at a minimum, there are going to be votes by the city council to set this up, and votes by the city council at a minimum, if you assume that the city council makes the appointments and as a body makes the appointments to the council, to the utility commission or utility authority, there at least be those votes. There may be full-blown elections for members of the Vero Beach Electric Utility Commission that would take place in some way in the future. But those are issues to be addressed in working out the details of whatever the governing document's going to turn out to be.
I would suggest that before you have this election, you have this authority, the wording worked out. You also have the representation worked out.
Yes, sir.
And how the people would be represented, so that people know what they're voting for.
Yes, sir.
And just putting it on the website, I think you're going to have to publish it in the paper or send it out, maybe in the bills as to what this is beforehand.
I'm not sure, but I think that's number 2 down here.
It is, but I mean, I'm saying it should be sent out beforehand.
Yeah.
Before you vote for the referendum, you ought to know what you're voting for.
Yes, sir.
Now, I got a question. Mark, you got something on this or later? Or?
On this specifically.
All right, you want 2 minutes or 3 minutes?
Thank you. Mark Mucher, 617 Indian Lilac Road. I've been a full-time resident of the city for almost 30 years now, and this has got to be at least one of the stupidest discussions I've ever heard, and probably one of the biggest wastes of time and money. Starting with the state statute doesn't make any sense. I don't know if you could get Mrs. Mayfield to rescind it or not, but I don't know, and I guess this is a question for Chef, but is the town of Indian River Shores even really interested in this? And whether they are or not, I think everybody feels that it's probably going to go to court, and why are we wasting this time and money before it does go to court? Are we just trying to placate them or show them we're making a good faith effort or what? But I've had informal discussions with people from the shores, and this is not one of their greatest priorities, or it wasn't a couple months ago anyway. So I think we're just spinning our wheels here and spending our money, and I don't understand any of it. But thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Can I, one more? On the other one?
Bob?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The statute mentioned water and sewer and other utilities. Will they be included?
No.
That's something that you and council can consider. That's not part of my thought.
Okay, I don't think it should, but but it was in there.
It's in the statute, but it's not in the resolutions.
Wasn't the statute amended to eliminate those?
What? The statute?
I thought I saw somewhere reference that that part of the statute was amended.
In 2012 or something?
Yeah, just fairly recently to separate out the electric from the other utilities.
That's correct. They did eliminate subsection E of the statute, and so the remaining question is, and references in the remaining statute only refer to the electric utility. And that's the premise that we were going with.
That's my question.
All right. Anything? Go ahead.
I would like to say one other thing.
Sure.
And this is partially responsive to Mark's comments. We're in a lawsuit with the town of Indian River Shores in which they have raised as specific counts in their complaint that the claim that the city is in violation of 36604 sub 7 by not having held a referendum. They've asked for declaratory relief, basically asking the court to tell us to hold a referendum. And they've raised also as a claim that there are due process and equal protection problems with the city's failure to have representation in a utility authority for the body that sets their rates. I will tell you as an aside on that issue was decided 46 years ago by the Florida Supreme Court in a case called Story v. Mayo that says, no, that's not right. You can go talk to the city council, and if you think your rates are too high, you can go to circuit court, which is what the town of Indian River Shores has done properly, legally, to say their rates are too high. Please tell them to fix them. Now, in objective terms, I don't think our rates are too high in any way that's cognizable under utility regulation, but that's a fact issue that will be decided by the court. But back to what I was saying, we're in litigation where the town has said, we want a representative utility authority because our due process and equal protection rights are being denied. We want a referendum consistent with the statute. We're in mediation. We're headed toward mediation. In dispute resolution on this, we have proposed these in good faith to address the concerns articulated by our customers.
Any other comment?
One last question.
Yeah.
Question on the utility authority. Will the city of Vero Beach transfer any assets out from under its control and other ownership of those assets to the utility authority?
That is a separate issue that will have to be addressed. As the world exists today, the city could not do that.
Good.
Because under, you're not going to like this, but under our contracts, our project contracts with FMPA for the Stanton 2, and St. Lucie projects, in which we participate as virtual co-owners, we cannot transfer all or substantially all of our system to anybody. Now, having said that, if we were to want to set up a utility authority, that would we could set it up and the city would still retain ownership. That's fine. If we wanted to set it up in such a way that we actually transferred the assets from the city to the utility authority, there are some other steps that would have to be taken. Specifically, we would have to get the statute, the FMPA organizational statutes, amended to allow for membership by municipal utility entities, and in this hypothetical scenario, this utility authority, to become members of FMPA. At present, you can only become a member of FMPA if you were a municipality as of 2008, and that was amended from an earlier date in order to let Winter Park in after they took over ownership of their system from the old Progress, now Duke Energy. That is doable. It has been done, and that would be doable. But like I said, there are additional things that would have to be done before any transfer of the assets could take place.
Jeff, then Fort Pierce is not, Fort Pierce Utility Authority is not a member of the FNPA, not subject to the contracts. I mean, you mentioned four or five other utility authorities are already in existence.
Six. I'm pretty sure that Fort Pierce is a member of FMPA.
Fort Pierce is a municipality. But all of these six utility authorities are Orlando Utility Authority is a member of the FMPA.
Yes, sir.
But they're not a municipality.
Correct. But they were a municipal utility as of whatever date it was that allowed them to become members of FMPA. The issue here is the original date was, I think, 1973. If you were whatever you were as of then, you could be a member of FMPA. Winter Park wasn't. They were a municipality, but they didn't have an electric system. So when I believe they finally closed on their acquisition of the Progress assets, I think in 2006, it was plus or minus. And subsequent to that, they amended the statute to allow for Winter Park to become a member of FMPA. Fort Pierce Utility Authority, I think, was a utility authority these 40-odd years ago. And so they were in ab initio, as it were, just as was OUC. They were chartered in 1923. I just happen to know that. But it just has to do with eligibility for membership in FMPA under the FMPA statute. And for us we could validly transfer our assets to another member of FMPA, but we can't do that. We can't make that transfer otherwise, which is why I said we could continue to own the assets and have a utility authority created to operate the business using the statutory language. Or we could transfer the assets, but before we could accomplish that, we'd have to have the statute changed so that we could make the transfer of assets to the utility authority to an entity that was validly a member of FMPA. It's probably more process than substance, but that's what it is.
So in the case of just transferring the operations of the utility, any future sale of the utility would have to still go through the city?
Yes.
Okay.
Any future sale of the assets, yes.
It would also seem to me that if you're transferring assets, that there would be a requirement, not a lawyer, it would seem to be a requirement of the voters of the city of Vero Beach to approve any such action prior to it occurring.
I agree with you.
So we'd have at least one more referendum if that gets involved. Okay.
All right. Any other questions? We go on?
Okay. And the last thing I have for you today is, I said, fairly new news, which is the update on our discussions with Orlando Utilities Commission regarding possible amendments to our existing PPA. This background, I think you all know, our existing PPA was entered into in 2008. It runs through December 31st, 2029. In our quest to reduce our rates, Jim and I have met with OUC several times beginning in August. And in mid-October, they gave us one set of of proposed terms that they would, subject to their board's approval, that they would suggest to their board would merit favorable consideration to amend the contract. That included fairly significant reductions in the capacity payment prices that we would pay them under the PPA, but it included some other things that were of concern to some members of this body and some members of council and some members of the public. And those were discussed at Utilities Commission and council meetings on October 21. And I'm just looking at you should have a memo packet that looks like this, and I just noticed a typo that I will tell you about. Sorry.
Yeah, we got one.
Okay. If you look at the first page after the text of the memorandum, there's a header that says in the third column, it says October 25th, 2014. That is a typo, and that should say October 20th, 2014. Those were the discussion points that were discussed at Utilities Commission and Council on October 21. But they are what they are. It's discounts from the current rate of $13,205 per megawatt month to $5,500 per megawatt month in the first year, and then they escalate just as the prices escalate under the existing PPA, but they hit a cap that's, if you include transmission, it's $11,861 in the out years per megawatt month, as compared to the cap in the existing PPA of $14,950 per megawatt month. They would also sell us peaking capacity. They would get the benefit of having a floor on the minimum amount of capacity that we would take from them at 85 megawatts, which is significantly less than we are paying for, have paid for, or are expected to pay for, but it provides them with some protection down the road. They, under the October 20th terms, would have gotten the unilateral option to terminate as early as 2020 with 2 years' notice to the city. They would have gotten the option to buy our share of the output of the St. Lucie project pursuant to a PPA rather than pursuant to assignment. They would have to exercise that option before 2029. And they would receive permanent release from us. They would get the permanent rights to our gas transportation contracts with FGT. Some of these were of concern to some of y'all and members of the public and council. And we were asked to go back to OUC, and accordingly we did. I communicated the concerns to OUC, and we eventually met with them on November 19, and not quite 2 weeks ago. Jim and I met with them again and had a good discussion. And then this past Tuesday, November 25, they sent us some revised proposals. And as I said to the Utilities Commission and Council on the 21st of October, I said, I'm happy to take these back, but the question was generically, well, suppose we don't want to give them the St. Lucie option, we don't want to give them the gas transportation rights, and we want a shorter term. I said, well, thinking about this as an economist, which I sort of used to be, not sort of, I was, you are asking them to take less value in this deal. I would expect them to offer you less favorable prices. And accordingly, they did. But the third column lays out what they offered us this past Tuesday, and this is backed up by attachment C in the packet here. And so the prices are higher, not surprisingly. The prices for the peaking capacity are the same as they were in the previous proposal. There's no St. Lucie option. There's no one-way OUC gets to walk option. And, in fact, there's no termination provision. There's no provision for either party to walk. But the new proposal is that the whole deal would end at December 31, 2023, 6 years before the current contract would end. And that's these are things that you can consider. On the FGT proposal, they would still get the permanent release, except we, the city, would get the unilateral right to recall or reclaim our rights under the gas transportation contracts if we build new gas-fired capacity. We, not an IP independent power producer. If we build new gas-fired capacity at the existing Vero Beach power plant, Big Blue site, by December 31, 2024 to serve our native load. We could get our gas transportation rights back, which I think is reasonable in both directions. If we need it, they'll give it back to us. If we don't need it, they want to keep it as part of the value exchange in the overall transaction. And these are things that have to be considered. And like I said, I'm somewhat apologetic, although I think it's understandable that since I got these on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, I didn't get the memo written till Saturday and emailed to Wayne on that date, and you all are just seeing it for the first time today. But at the end of the text of the memo, it says there are a lot of moving parts here that need to be analyzed. You've got the base capacity purchase, you've got the discounts there, you've got the peaking capacity purchase, you've got other aspects that are going on, you've got consideration of the value of the St. Lucie option, you've got consideration of the value of the FGT agreements. You've got a value consideration as to whether you want to shorten the PPA term by 6 years. One way of looking at this, and these are things that we will flesh out in the not distant future as we proceed on this, but one way of looking at this is OUC is offering to sell us on the October option. They're offering to sell us capacity through 2029 at prices that on their face don't look half bad. They bear further analysis as to and comparison as to whether we think they're good prices compared to what we think the long-term cost of buying capacity in the market is going to be, or building our own. And that's something we need to look at. That's one of the moving parts to which I refer. But you and council need to think this through and look at a bunch of scenarios, a bunch of sensitivity analyses, as I would call them in utility system planning or economic analysis, to really think through what you want to do. If you think, if you terminate the contract in 2023, you're in the market on January 1st, 2024. And what you believe about that, what that market will look like on January 1st, 2024, will inform your decision as to whether you really want to pull the plug and kill the PPA 6 years earlier. Because remember, you've got the option to take a PPA that has fixed pricing at $10,000 a kW a month plus the transmission that will run you all the way through 2029. If you think those prices are favorable compared to what you think the market price is going to be in those years, you'll think, I don't know, I'm not real wild about a 15-year contract, but these prices aren't that bad. You might make that decision. On the other hand, if you think the market price is going to be $7,000 a megawatt month in those years, you might say, well, this is a no-brainer. Let's take our chances on the market. But it will put because I'll be involved in this with other experts, but it will put our belief in what we think the future is going to look like to the test. And every forward-looking decision involves risk, and every forward-looking decision involves an evaluation of uncertainty and upsides and downsides. And that's what I'm saying here: is we need to think, work, analyze this all through.
Chef, you might want
Sir.
to give a little background on the FGT contract and the complications of that for us, even if we owned it, how we try to get rid of it. So.
Yeah. All we can do if we were to reclaim ownership of the FGT contracts, all we can do is resell it. By the terms of those contracts, you can only resell it, and FERC regulations, you can only resell it at the maximum price under the contract. So if we have it, we're paying the rate, 82 cents a thousand MMBTU of transportation capacity a day. We can't resell it for $1.25. We can resell it for 82 cents. And if we can't resell it, we're still paying the 82 cents.
And if we can't use it?
If we can't use it, we're still paying the 82 cents if we have it. If OUC has it, they're paying the 82 cents. It's one more factor that we have to really think through carefully as we go forward here.
Is there any cost for this recall? Any cost to us? Do we have to compensate OUC financially if we did decide to recall it?
No.
Okay.
No. We have to build capacity
Well, sure.
to serve our native load by
But there's no
12/31/24, but there's
no
no,
use.
we don't have to pay them.
Okay.
Correct.
Any other question?
Yeah, have you done any more detailed analysis? I know I got some information. We all got some information from Tom on the cost analysis for the peaking capacity versus the continued operation of the plant. That was a little soft in your October 21st presentation.
The answer is yes, and I apologize. It's taken me a while, but as we all know, I got a lot going on. I did actually send you a write-up with what I had yesterday. I sent it through Jim, through Tammy. You should have it in your inbox by now, and I have a copy I'll give you right this minute. Now,
Okay.
and the answer is, you had asked, did we do a break-even analysis? We did not do what I would characterize as a formal break-even analysis. What we, and by we I mean Jim and Tom and I, basically, with Cindy sitting there, thought about it and looked at it. And we said, look, it's going to cost us, $3.5 million a year or $3.75 a kW a month to buy this peaking capacity. But let's say it's going to cost us $3.5 million a year to buy the peaking capacity. That's the best estimate we have. We will be able to save at implementation a little more than $4 million a year in ongoing O&M costs. We also believe, and at the time it was based on conversation, frankly, between me and Tom. Tom says, I think it's going to be $3 million a year to keep Big Blue running, probably for the indefinite future. He subsequently documented that in an email that you should have gotten copied on, in which he came up with an estimate over the next 3 years of expenditures of $10.05 million to keep Big Blue running. He also recommends shutting down Unit 3 altogether. So that's $3.3 million a year, whatever it is. So, in just rough terms at that time, we're looking at $3.5 million plus something unknown versus 4 plus 3 as savings. It looked like, on its face, that was a reasonable proposition for further consideration. As I said a minute ago, there's a bunch of stuff here. There's the base capacity purchase, there's the term of the contract now that's in play, there's the peaking capacity purchase, there's shutting down Big Blue, there's what the impacts on rates are, there's the St. Lucie option, there's the FGT situation, there's what I think I said, the term of the contract. These are all things that we really need to work through. And at the time we looked at it a month ago, or 5.5 weeks ago, it was on its face, this looks like a reasonable deal. It looks like buying the peaking capacity from OUC should save us money versus what it will cost us to continue to operate Big Blue.
Okay, I'll look forward to that email.
Well, I'm going to give you a copy of it, too, because I have one for you.
All right, thank
Just
you.
in case.
All right.
One more question, if I may. Are there futures markets for electrical power and gas transmissions? I mean, could we balance our costs in that way?
Yeah. The answer is in practical terms, there are at least you can sign forward contracts for the delivery of electricity, capacity, and energy. You can. I'm not intimately familiar with the capacity release provisions. I know there's a FERC website where you go and you post the release of your capacity. If you have somebody signed up to take it at the maximum price, then you can make that deal. I don't know if you can say, I want to release such and such capacity in the year 2024. I don't know if there's a futures market for that at the detailed level that we're talking about here, i.e. delivery on the FGT system to Vero Beach for delivery in 2024. I don't know whether there is such a market. I'm kind of doubtful that there is. And it is an important nuance here in that the delivery capability, the product we have to release, the rights we have to release are delivery to Vero Beach. And OUC pointed this out to us, that just because it's deliverable to Vero Beach does not mean that it's always deliverable to OUC, which actually impinges in a negative way on the value of this release capacity to them.
Thank you.
And their gas supply, bulk gas supply at Henry Hub contracts all over the place. That's fine, but it's the transportation rights that we have that we're talking about. That's the question I was trying to answer.
And who knows where the gas prices are going to go in 10 years, too. I'd hate to.
They were low for 30 years. They spiked badly in 2002. They spiked significantly in 2005. They went through the roof in 2008. Since then, fracking
down.
and shale gas has worked out so far. Prices are very soft, but nobody knows what's going to happen. And I'll tell you, I'm on good first name basis with the senior management of Florida's utilities. And, it's everybody just kind of holding their breath and crosses their fingers that gas price stays at $4.50. They're all concerned about being 60-70% gas fired. It is a concern. It's a risk, but it's what we're stuck with today.
And if we start to export it, then there'd be a problem.
Yeah, but we still it's gas. It's the delta between gas and coal that's the significant feature, and I'm not sure that even if we were to see a change in the administration, we would get a change in the regulatory environment on coal. So it's that differential that's really
That's right.
the important thing.
That's right. And
I don't know that we'll ever see coal cheaper than gas again.
it depends on the price of gas, I think.
Well, indeed it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. The differential.
More than on the price of coal. The price of coal is probably going to stay inch up because we're exporting a lot of it.
Well, it's not the price of coal, but it's the price of burning coal.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, Jim, you want us to make a comment on these resolutions, whether we agree with them? And
The answer is yes, sir, we would. We would like to be able to report to the city council, which is what we're doing today, is giving you the first view of that and coming from the utility authority. And it would really be good if we could get a recommendation one way or the other from the utility authority to pass.
okay, what we would give you is approval on going forward.
Yes, sir.
Because then we'd probably like to look at them again to know what the details are, since we don't have much in the way of details right now.
Just move forward with the process.
Right. Any comments on that?
I would I'd like to put one thing in there, is that the resolution, the second resolution, okay, that we make it clear that the ordinance is developed and available prior to the referendum for creating an authority, so that we've got something to say. We're on board with that, or we're not on board with it. And secondly, and more important, the people that are going to be voting on this thing have something to grab onto.
I agree with that, and I think everybody agrees with that.
Yeah.
It has to be done.
Absolutely.
Before we get.
Herb, is your motion that we're on board with this, or
No, I haven't made a motion. I just said.
Because it seems like it's already being amended.
Well, I mean, that's right. I didn't make a motion at all, but I think I agree with what he says. If we make a motion, it should be in there that the resolution has to be made of what this ordinance says prior to any election, and it is published.
And I think that's inherent.
Well, it's inherent, but at least we can put it in there and make sure.
Our ask of you is that you authorize us to go forward. This will come back to you. It'll come back to council.
But I think we can put that in our motion.
Yeah, we're not. I don't think we're amending the resolution.
No, we're not
but
amending. We're just saying that.
Clarifying the sense of the commission, I think.
So somebody want to make a resolution? You want me to make a resolution? I'll make a resolution that we approve both of these, but that the ordinance needs to be developed prior to and published prior to any referendum being held. That we authorize the city to go forward with both of these resolutions.
Second.
Any comment?
I guess I feel that we haven't really looked far enough ahead to see where we're going to be under the authority and what the authority is going to cover, and that
Well, that's why we
really
said
bothers me.
it's got to be done before there's a resolution. They're going to have to bring it back to us anyway,
Yeah.
prior to though.
This is just authorizing staff to do
Go
that,
ahead.
Bob,
Okay, so
to develop
so
something.
saying that we haven't authorized the referendum itself or moving toward
No, we're
The
just telling them to go forward
authority,
to
you know,
do.
you can go ahead with what we're
Yeah.
with developing it.
All right.
We're in
You want to call? Well, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, Chef.
Thank you all. Glad to be here.
Herb, before the chef leaves, if I could just circle back to one thing. One of the things that was important when we redid the Utility Commission last spring, in fact, Mayor Winger insisted on it, and it pushed it back a couple months, was that we have county representation here on this utility authority, this commission. And I believe that, Mr. Carpenter, you're the only county resident on the board. Is that correct?
I am a county resident. I don't know who else is.
It's in, I
But
don't,
we are Indian River Shores representative,
and
not
well,
here.
Indian River Shores is a name as well.
Yeah.
And of course, each county resident needs to be a customer as well. By ordinance, they have to be either a water, sewer, or electric customer to be qualified to be on the board. And I just want to make sure that as you go forward, that you maintain this the representation between the ratepayers on any proposed ordinance.
The utility authority, however, it's what we envision, it will have the representation of the customers associated with their locations. So there'd be no reason to establish a utility authority that was just the city. So, and that is going to be part of the process. But as Chef said, we will be meeting hopefully with both the city of Indian River or the town of Indian River Shores and the county to help draft how that representation is going to be presented on the utility authority and how they are chosen through elections or whatever the process may be. But I think that's going to be a collaborative effort between the three parties involved. And it's really important to understand this. The fundamentals of this is to address what has come out in the litigation, and we feel like that we need to be negotiating in good faith. We have done that. We've gone through 2 of these, or actually 3 of these meetings. We've got the 4th one coming up, and we've taken note of what was in the litigation, what was being demanded, and trying to address those issues. And so when we get through with the exercise, it will involve both the county and the town to be part of the effort to establish this utility authority to make sure representation is addressed.
All right, any old business? All right, my matters. We got, from Tom, we got this list of cost by unit, and comes to 10 million, what you were referring to, the 10 million 05. If unit 3 is retired, that 2 million 8 disappears, right? Also, 4 is talked about being taken out, right? Is that right, Tom? I mean, Jim?
The answer is yes, except that we have to go through the pool on that because we are significant. Tom, if you want to come up here, what we're trying to do is look at the cost benefit of what we are required to have. 2 and 5 obviously is what's under contract.
Right.
Unit 3 started having the boiler issue and the tubes, and we just found that it was just not practical to reinvest in that. And I think Unit 1 and 4, Unit 1's probably our most efficient right now, isn't it? But Tom, if you don't mind, if you can.
Just a quick non-quantitative assessment. Unit 1 is the oldest unit. It's the least efficient. It's probably in the best condition right now. It has had a considerable amount of work done over the last, it's been several years now, maybe 10 years ago or whatever, but it's not been used a lot since then. So it's there, it's small, it's inefficient, but it's probably the most reliable unit we have. Unit 3, we decided to quit throwing money at it in October and permanently took it offline. Unit 4 is the largest steam unit. It's the newest steam unit, although it probably was put in the early 80s. I'm trying to remember the date. So it's not exactly young. It does have some questionable conditions in the boiler. If you really wanted to use it long term, I would suggest we have a boiler assessment done where you have some experts come in and actually they do non-destructive testing on various sections of the boiler tubes to see what kind of condition they're in and come up with a plan for repairs and refurbishment. That could be significant. I don't have a good idea yet at this point, but we've had a number of tube failures this year in Unit 4 that would lead me to suspect that there's at least some sections in there that need to have some major work done. Major work. So
how often have we run this in the last couple of years?
At 4? Well, I can't tell you exactly. It kind of goes in spurts. We ran quite a bit in August and September. Before that, not much. And your question is a good one. The only value in keeping units, except for 2 and 5, which are under contract, the only value in keeping the other units operational is if we can sell enough power from them to make enough money on the margin to cover our costs. And I don't think we're doing that right now. So my philosophy has been, and as you saw with Unit 3, is if it needs a major amount of work, to think about just not repairing it anymore. But that kind of gradually gets us into the retirement or power plant decommissioning scenario, kind of whether we like it or not. So I really would like to have us have a direction on what we're going to do instead before we get too far down the road in terms of not repairing these units to the point where we can't get them repaired without a substantial expense.
Well, 4 looks like it's not very good. It's $3,190,000 cost in there to keep it running. If we're not using it, we're not making any money on it.
Right. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't spend. That's why that's not on the budget. You asked what it would cost to keep the plant running long term. That's what it would cost. It's not in the budget. Next time we have a major repair, probably it's not going to get repaired.
Okay. The one other. Okay, that's. Anybody else have any questions on that?
Well, I just if we're considering decommissioning 4, and right now there's a surplus of power in the pool, would now be a good time? I would think now would be a good time to go to the pool and get permission to decommission it, rather than sometime in the future that perhaps the surplus power is gone and now the pool's going to rely on it, and we would then have to repair it.
Well, actually, we're under no obligation to the pool for those units. We have the choice to choose to retire them whenever we want to.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what Mr. O'Connor said.
So that's
That is true. One of the things with the pool, though, we've got to remember is the reliability of the area. And so when you start taking some of the generation off, I guess it's a moral obligation more than it is a financial obligation to make sure that it sort of keeps the reliability issues up. And one of the things we've relied on is the Unit 4 and Unit 1, when we could turn it on, for example, on the margins, but also to keep hours up. But when you start removing generation, you just need to make everybody aware that that's taking place. And
well, then perhaps we should exercise our duty under that moral obligation and make the pool aware now that we're going to be taking this offline.
And as Tom said, that we have no problem with that, especially if a repair comes up. I mean, I don't think there's going to be that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but I don't think there's going to be a change in that delta of the supply versus the demand anytime in the near future.
Well, when we've run for, has it been for us or export?
The answer is yes, both. Sometimes one and sometimes the other. There's an operational issue. You know, we're kind of, in the utility business, we're kind of like the belts and suspenders approach to being safe, because we want to, our first responsibility is make sure we have enough capacity to serve our customers and serve them in a reliable way. There are occasions when there's not enough transmission available to deliver the peaking power that we might want to purchase the next day, rather than generate it ourselves, because we don't have enough transmission capacity to deliver all of our power. So, our first choice is, well, can we buy that peaking capacity on a short, like for a few hours the next day from OUC or from the pool? And if there's transmission available on a secondary basis, we'll take that and don't run a unit. There are days, however, when we can't get that capacity, and we know that a day in advance. Just to be safe, our general process has been, on those days, if we need to start a unit, we'll start unit 4, because we need 6 or 8 hours notice to get started. We can do that easily, because we know the day before, try to get that online, have it ready for us to cover the peak the next day. If 4 fails to start, then we can fall back on units 5 and 2, because we can start them in short notice. If we do it the other way around, we wait till the next day and we go to start 5 and we can't get it online, then we're caught in a unreserved use of FPL's transmission situation, which we don't want to get into. It's a penalty situation. It costs us dollars. And it's an escalating penalty. First time you do it, it's not too bad. If you do it twice in the same week, it's bad. If you do it 3 or 4 times in the same month, it's real bad. It's way more expensive than doing something else. So they make that punitive on purpose. So that's been our boot. So if we retire 4, we've lost that capability, just having that. We've lost either the belt or the suspenders, and we're going to have to depend on the other ones. On those rare occasions, and the nurse maybe half a dozen times a year. So it depends on the year. Dozen times a year when we need to start a unit to cover our peak, when you can't get transmission to cover that next day.
Hey, Jim, when is the transmission? We're doing a study, right? We're going to be doing a study?
Let me address that. Unfortunately, we have the order of business is we have to have a capacity contract executed with someone in order to ask FPL for transmission. And they're in the position, they can't tell us exactly whether they can or cannot provide that and how long it's going to take. Actually, they will never say no. They will just say it's going to take this long and cost this much.
Okay.
So the process generally is we sign the contract for the capacity. We need peaking capacity.
But then you got to pay for it.
Well, our contract generally is contingent on getting transmission that's acceptable to us.
Okay.
So then we go to the FPL. We make that request next. It's a serial thing. You got to do one first, then the other one. Wait for an answer, and then we determine whether we can go ahead and do that or fall back on some other plan.
Mr. Chairman, the bottom line on this is that Tom and I have been talking about that. We feel administratively we can sign one of these short-term capacity contracts in order to get this study started. So we're in the process of making that, having that worked up. We've been talking to OUC, and during this exercise, we'll probably do something with short-term capacity, which shows where we're going to have that capacity coming from that will allow the study to get started. And so hopefully, 3 or 4 months, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mark, you have something to add here?
Mark Mucher again. I hate asking hard questions, but I find myself doing it a lot. Herb, you asked Tom if we ran Unit 4 very much. I don't have the numbers, but it seems to me that 2 and 5 has been down a lot, and we run Unit 4 when 2 and 5 are down. So that would tell me that if something's running, it's probably Unit 4. As a matter of fact, during your last meeting, 2 was down, so 2 and 5 are down, and 3's gone. So now we're looking at 1 and 4 again. So I guess I'm asking what the status and the outlook for 2 and 5 is, because if we take 4 down, then and we continue having issues with 2 and 5, then we're relying on 1, and it's as he
It's not
said,
very big.
tiny and inefficient.
Well, Tom, you want to answer that?
Now, let me see if I can reframe the question.
Well,
'Cause I'm not sure
what's,
what that-
what's the status of 2 and 5?
Status
How
of
are
2
they
and
doing?
5. 2 is still under repair. We should probably have finished this week. 5 can run, so we can start on simple cycle. And 4 is operational, and 1 is operational right now. So we're okay.
Now, what's the matter with 2?
2, we had a bearing failure on it, and it's a 4-bearing machine. And when we started working on it, we realized the other bearings had
Oh,
also
okay,
been
you were
damaged.
replacing one at a time.
So we had to replace 1. In order to keep from having to lift all the rotors out, we replace 2 at a time, basically. Pull them up with a sling. Take the bearings, send them to Jacksonville to be rebuilt. So we've had that done with all of them. All the units now, all the bearings have been refurbished and are being reinstalled, and should have it up hopefully by the end of this week.
Does that mean it's going to run for the next year?
Oh, I would certainly hope so. We always think that, when we do these repairs, this is it, it's going to run forever. But it's an old machine, like many things in the plant, and we always have little surprises.
No, I know.
I think I wrote in one of my memos, we have a lot of surprises, and they're never good. They're always bad.
Yeah. I just have one other quick thing. I sent a link to a video, and somebody's questioned about the video about electromagnetic pulse and what it might do to the systems. I don't need to say anything more, but I do have a book by the person if anybody wants to read it. Because hopefully it'll never happen, but if it does, we're in real trouble. All right, anybody, members, got any questions? Jack?
Nope.
No. Bill? No? Bob? George? No? Well, since we have no matters, I guess we can. The next meeting is the 16th of December. It'll be at 9 o'clock because as the minutes that we approved say our meetings will start at 9 o'clock instead of 10. And you're going to have to run it because I'm going to be out of town. So, meeting is adjourned.